information.
What's your name?
I haven't committed a crime, sir.
Okay, you been drinking today?
I have not.
Okay. Well, the wind blowing this way, it does smell like it. Have you been drinking today at all?
No, sir, I have not.
You're under arrest for public intoxication. But I'm waiting on a taxi. I haven't even been driving. Turn around, put your hands behind your back. Those were the words that turned a quiet night into a constitutional question. A man standing outside, doing what many would consider the responsible thing, waiting for a ride instead of driving, ends up in handcuffs. Not for driving, not for causing a disturbance, but for allegedly being intoxicated in public. And what makes this case even more controversial is what happens next. The man asserts his rights, records the interaction, and suddenly this becomes something much bigger. A First Amendment audit, a public intoxication arrest, and a debate about where police authority actually ends. So how did waiting for a taxi turn into a criminal charge? The man at the center of this encounter is a private citizen, someone who, by all available information, wasn't committing any obvious crime when this began. He's standing outside a business late at night in Texas, waiting for a taxi or rideshare. He's not behind the wheel of a car, he's not attempting to drive. In fact, the entire point of waiting there is to avoid driving while impaired. By most standards, that's the responsible decision. But like many First Amendment auditors, he's also recording. That matters, because while standing there, phone in hand, documenting the environment and any potential police interaction, officers take notice. And from their perspective, what they see isn't just a man waiting, it's someone they believe might be intoxicated in a public place. From his perspective, he's doing nothing wrong. From their perspective, they may believe they have a situation developing, and that tension is exactly where this encounter begins. Body cam footage shows officers approaching calmly at first. "Hey man, what's going on tonight?" "I'm just waiting for a taxi." "You been drinking?" "I don't answer questions." That response, simple, direct, is where the tone begins to shift. Officers take note of his demeanor. They observe his speech, his balance, his behavior. "Step over here for me." "Am I being detained?" "Yes, you are." Now things escalate slightly. The man continues recording. "I'm just waiting for a ride. I'm not driving." "Okay, but you're intoxicated in public." "I'm not a danger to anyone." And this is the key moment. The officer's justification begins to center on public intoxication, not driving under the influence, but simply being intoxicated in a public space in a way they believe could pose a danger. Turn around. For what? You're under arrest. And just like that, the situation moves from a conversation to a custodial arrest. Now this is where the legal questions begin. In Texas, public intoxication laws generally allow officers to arrest someone if they appear intoxicated in a public place to the degree that they may endanger themselves or others. That last part is critical. It's not enough in many cases to simply be intoxicated. The key issue is whether there's a potential danger. So a court may look at factors like whether the person is stumbling into traffic, causing a disturbance, or at risk of harming themselves. Standing still, waiting for a taxi doesn't automatically meet that threshold. But officers are given discretion. They can make judgment calls based on what they observe. Now let's talk about the First Amendment side. Recording police in public is generally protected, as long as you're not interfering with their duties. So, holding a phone and documenting the interaction is not by itself a crime. But sometimes officers may perceive that recording as escalating the situation, or they may feel challenged by it. And that perception can influence how the interaction unfolds, even if it shouldn't. At this point, the legal question becomes whether the officer had reasonable grounds to believe this man was a danger due to intoxication, or whether this was an overreach. Back to the footage. The man is now in handcuffs. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're intoxicated in public." "I'm waiting for a ride. That's the responsible thing." Officers begin searching him. "Do you have anything on you?" "I don't consent to any searches." Despite that, the search continues as part of the arrest process. He's placed in the back of a patrol car. At this point, the tone has fully shifted from inquiry to enforcement. But here's where it becomes more complicated. There's no indication he was violent, no indication he was attempting to flee, no clear evidence, at least from the initial interaction, that he posed a danger to himself or others. And yet, he's now facing a criminal charge. From the officer's perspective, they may argue they were preventing a potential hazard. From the citizen's perspective, this feels like punishment for simply existing in public while recording. And this is where the situation becomes more than just an arrest. It becomes a question of judgment. Let's go deeper. Public intoxication laws are often criticized because of how subjective they can be. What does endangerment actually look like? That's not always clearly defined. One officer might see someone swaying slightly and decide they're fine. Another officer might see the same behavior and decide it's a risk. And courts often defer to officer judgment unless that judgment is clearly unreasonable. Now let's talk about the arrest itself. Once an arrest is made, officers generally have the authority to search the individual as part of that process. So even if the person says they don't consent, the search can still be lawful if the arrest itself is valid. But that's the key issue. If the arrest wasn't justified, if there was no real probable cause for public intoxication, then everything that follows can be challenged. And this is where First Amendment concerns come back in. If someone is recording police and then gets arrested under a vague charge, courts may look at whether that arrest was influenced by the recording itself. Was the law applied fairly? Or was it used as a tool to shut down protected activity? That's a difficult question, and one that often gets answered later in court, not on the street. In cases like this, the aftermath is just as important as the incident itself. Was the charge pursued? Was it dropped? Did the individual file a complaint or a lawsuit? In many similar situations, public intoxication charges are later dismissed, especially if there's little evidence of actual danger. Sometimes departments review the footage. Sometimes they stand by the officer's decision. And in today's world, once body cam footage is released, the public forms its own judgment very quickly. If a lawsuit is filed, it often centers on unlawful arrest and violation of constitutional rights. But those cases can take time, and they depend heavily on how a court interprets the officer's judgment in that moment. So let's break it down. Did the officer have legal authority? Maybe. Public intoxication laws do give officers discretion. If they genuinely believed this individual was a danger, a court might support that decision. But having authority does not automatically mean the decision was wise, ethical, or necessary. Because here's the other side. The individual was not driving. He was waiting for a ride. He was stationary. He was documenting the interaction. There's no clear indication, based on what we see early on, that he was creating a risk. So could this have been handled differently? Absolutely. A simple conversation, a short observation period, even just allowing the taxi to arrive. Instead, the situation escalated into an arrest. Now, to be fair, officers are trained to identify potential risks. They may have seen signs that aren't obvious on camera. But here's where discretion matters, because the power to arrest is one of the most serious tools an officer has, and using that power in borderline situations can raise serious concerns about fairness and judgment. Encounters like this show how quickly things can escalate, even when someone believes they're doing the right thing. If you're ever in a similar situation, staying calm matters. You can assert your rights, but tone and timing are everything. You can record, but avoid interfering. If questioned, you can ask if you're being detained. And if things go further, the courtroom, not the street, is where those issues get resolved. Because once the situation turns physical, your options are become limited. Do you think this was lawful police work, or did this officer take a routine situation way too far?